What is the biggest it's one banana? What can it cost? $10 moment you've witnessed in real life. I work at a veterinary hospital in a fairly wealthy area. Once had a client hand me a $50 for a $9 nail trim on her dog. I told her the price and she just shrugged, told me to keep the change and said that would be my lunch money for the week. I would love to be able to be so impulsively giving to random people. I once got asked to watch my buddy's mom's dog. Cute Pomeranian, super well behaved. I was stoked to watch the little dude. She messaged me and told me where the garage key was and that she left a couple $100 on the table for me. A couple hundred? I showed up at noon and took the money and the dog and went into town. Took him to the dog park, then the beach, and then we kicked it and napped for a couple hours. Dropped him off around 6 PM. It was the easiest $200 I've ever made. If it was just one day, that's insane, but dog watching is a lucrative business for sure. I grew up in a very well-to-do suburb and there was a family that would buy cedar clothes hangers for their closets. But then once the cedar smell wore off after a month or so, they'd buy new ones and take the old ones to Goodwill. Apparently just lightly sanding them to refresh the scent was too much trouble. I am clearly too poor since I've never heard of having cedar hangers. Had a roommate in college who was pretty well off. I was pretty much putting myself through school and was almost always broke. One day we went by the ATM that dispensed in $5 increments, yet I made dang sure I knew where those were. Anyway, turns out I had less than $5 in the bank. So looked at my buddy and said, "Well, looks like no beer for me tonight." He literally looked at me and said, "Well, just take it out of your other account." I just stared at him and asked what he meant. Turns out he legit thought that everybody had a second account their parents kept filled with emergency money. He did buy beer that night though, so he was a good guy, just kinda clueless. He did buy beer that night though. Oh, fuel mayo. At least that happened. I have an aunt and uncle who are both experienced aerospace engineers, retired military officers, now higher ups at private contractors. So they make an obscene amount of money. You can always tell how much they've lost touch with the value of a dollar when you look at presents they've bought. One time years ago at Christmas, they bought my aunt a $600 iPod and my mom a $20 trillion shirt. They didn't mean any insult. They just thought my mom would like a shirt better and that my aunt would like an iPod better. And they didn't even look at the prices of them. I have an uncle like that. A local football team asked his business to donate for their fundraiser, so he donated $5,000. The team was expecting $50 to $100. When we were kids, he'd buy my brother and I cheap little toys, then every few years buy us something really expensive like a $500 Skeletric set. Now my brother and I are grown up, but he does the same with our little cousins. Kinda the opposite, but I once went out with the ultra wealthy parents of this girl I was dating and they made a big deal of me ordering whatever I wanted and getting appetizers and dessert and drinks and everything. And once I put in like a $75 single person order, her dad just ordered 2 hot dogs and laughed at how expensive my meal was. It was the most expensive lunch I had ever had at that point, and I really respect that man's trollery. He had a much better sense of humor than his daughter. That's hilarious. I would have been dying from embarrassment. I was flying a private jet and the caterers forgot the owner's sandwich. He graciously said no big deal and I replied that I'd call when we landed because they charged $100 for it. He said, "Is that a lot? How much does a sandwich normally cost?" Had a client who dealt with one of America's richest men back in the late 1990s. He took him out for a night on the town and had to stop at an ATM. The rich guy had never seen one. His staff just got him cash when he needed it. It's a different life. The president of my company asked me if I thought I could live on $100 per day. I told him I did every single day. I was probably making $13 to $14 at the time. So out of touch with reality when that's what one makes in an hour. Absolutely not, sir. You should pay me about $200 a day. A customer called me about a mistake on their bill. They thought I forgot to add another zero. I'm a landscaper, mostly softscape and property maintenance. I got a new job slightly above minimum wage and my girlfriend's dad got excited for me and told me I could afford a new Tesla now. Spoiler, I cannot. I sold hash to a business partner of my dad's when I was in college. I had a variety and it was the only drug he enjoyed. He obliquely asked me to bring it over to him. No discussion of what or how much. I biked over to his very nice place and he had a coffee and a chat, and I simply handed it to him and was getting ready to leave, thinking maybe he'd have my dad pay me. Nope. As I left there was an envelope on next to the rear entrance. It contained $500 for like $80 of hash. He would repeat this several times. He just needed a source he could trust and not raise eyebrows. When my dad passed he helped manage the estate and we had an implicit mutual trust that made things go much easier. 80 was for the hash. 420 was for your silence about the hash. He knew what he was doing. Used to house sit for a rich dude with 3 homes in different states. Periodically he'd ask me to run an errand for him and would PayPal me money to cover the cost. He consistently overpaid for whatever the value was because I can only think in hundreds. Seemed like a nice problem to have. I asked a girl at a party if she had some cash to buy more alcohol and she gave me $500. That's when I realized she was drunk as crap. There was an obscenely rich kid that I went to high school with. At lunch one day, he thought his friend's peanut butter and jelly sandwich looked good so he offered him $20 for it. For the rest of the school year, the friend brought 2 sandwiches to lunch every day and gave the rich kid one for $20. Stonks. I worked for one family as the general family personal assistant for a long time. These people are wealthy. Like drop $1 million in cash on an oceanfront condo wealthy. The husband gave me $150 cash to go to the grocery store to buy a 12-pack of water and 6 $1 yogurts. I don't think he's even stepped foot in a grocery store before. I'm wicked late to this, but back when I was a cashier at Chipotle, I had a woman misunderstand the price of a burrito. She heard me say that'll be $7.28 and without any hesitation, counted out $8 100 bills from a wad of cash that must have been several $1,000s. We had a good laugh when she realized her mistake. She was carrying a suitcase and had a thick accent, so I think it may have been her first cash transaction in the US and she was just so rich that it didn't occur to her that $800 was a shitload of money to spend on a burrito. Hope this goes here. I repair bathtubs and showers. I've been in poor homes, middle class homes, wealthy homes and super mansions. So we were at this mansion, the kind where there's a tennis court and pool in the backyard. The kind where the foyer and first room of the house had 16x16 black granite tile with subfloor heating. Just this magnificent house with its 3-car garage. But in the garage there were 3 lifts to literally stack their vehicles. These suckers were loaded. They are updating the house to sell so they can move back to North Jersey. They replaced the soaking unit and the master. The granite in that bathroom was absolutely breathtaking. It was blue, and under a certain light sparkled like there were lights built into it. The deck was cracked at the cork line, so we're in there fixing it. Being as anal and meticulous as possible, BC, we know we're in probably the most expensive house ever. The wife comes in to chat with us and basically states that they just got the same kind of soaker as before, BC, it's the only thing that fit in the spot. Eventually she says something like, "It's okay though, it was only $8,000. If I was drinking something, I'd have choked on it." She said it like the tub was a piece of crap that she settled for, BC, it was cheap. $8,000 was a drop in the bucket. TLDR. Rich woman referred to an $8,000 soaking tub as cheap in so many words. In college, as I was making dinner one night, my wealthy roommate expressed surprise that you could get vegetables in a can, like totally in shock at the idea of canned vegetables. It turns out that in his house the cook simply went down to the market every afternoon to pick up fresh veggies, and he'd never known it could be done any other way. If I ever win the Powerball, this is the first thing I'm doing, hiring someone to cook for me. I worked at a very expensive and exclusive country club, the type you'd see the Bluffs at. One of the members drove her golf cart over from her house and said the help had forgotten to buy a loaf of bread and wanted to buy one from our kitchen. I told her that we couldn't sell her a loaf of bread, so she asked how many sandwiches a loaf of bread can make. I ended up selling her 10 sandwiches with nothing on it at $7 a piece. I was friends with a girl whose family was rich, and she said stuff like that constantly. Personally, I like when she said I'm going to my dorm this weekend. I think what I've been looking for is there. She has her own apartment. Her parents pay for a dorm for her for extra storage. She has a roommate and everything. Her roommate lives with all her junk. Sweet gig for the roommate though. When we were told the international tuition fees for a PhD were $30,000 and my mom said, well, that's not that much money. She also occasionally complains about how they're living in poverty, while also taking yearly trips to Europe. On the other hand, they can be quite generous with their time and support, so they can get away with the occasional tone-deaf comment. Hey geez, we pay for this here. It's a research job. One time I got texted by my dad's friend asking me to go pick up his car at the airport and take it to his house for him. Took like 5 minutes. Told me to keep the money under the floor mat. It was $250. I was like 16 too. That's pretty low for a drug mule. JK. My pops, grandfather, handled all the finances for him and my nana, grandmother, so she never did the shopping or paid any bills. Her net worth now as a widow isn't shy of £1 million. When Pops died, she bought herself a brand new car that was tailored to her disabilities. Because again, Pops always did the driving. Her car was around £16,000. This was her first experience of buying a vehicle and thus thought this was the standard price for any car. I bought myself a new car a few months later. It was the same model as hers but a few years older and had previous owners. All my other cars had come in under £600, and this new car was £5,000 and I took it out on finance, which was a huge deal for me. When she asked how much my car was, she was terrified that I'd bought a rundown pose car, and that there must be something horrendously wrong with it. We had to explain the value of cars to her and why mine was £10,000 less than hers. Flash forward to this year, my broke AF brother's death trap car pretty much exploded, so she took him to buy a new one. He'd seen a pretty good car for just under £1,000 and figured that's what he could afford to pay back. Before he mentions it, she drags him to the dealership and buys an approved used car, same model and year as mine, at £3,000 and can't believe her luck at how cheap it was, and gifts it to him because it was so cheap. Brother is speechless and very grateful. This is the same woman who had an absolute meltdown because her ambrosia custard pots had risen in price by 20p and she was now, very seriously, concerned that her continued purchase of them would bankrupt her. My brother moaning about his well-paying trade job and saying he was considering quilting it for a minimum wage supermarket job. What's minimum wage now? Like £10 an hour? No, it's £7.25. At that time, a few years ago. What? That's impossible. Who can live on that? Me. That's still minimum in my state but it's not a living wage. I do paid errands for my elderly cousin because she's decided I'm the bee's knees and a worthy charity. She's cool, just super out of touch and I don't think she ever had a concept of money to begin with. She thought a Starbucks latte I got her was $20 and assumed that like it was a reasonable price. A friend of mine was dating a super wealthy girl in college. Not sure how they got together. It was some internship thing or something. He grew up pretty poor, and he told me a story about how they were at Walmart and he was considering buying a pair of flip-flops, but they were like $10 and he wasn't so sure it was something he could afford at the time. Apparently she said to him, "What do you mean? You don't know if you should get them? Whenever I want new clothes, I just ask my daddy for the money card." She literally used the phrase "the money card" as if it was some weird artifact that magically made all clothes free for her, which I guess it kinda did. He also told me she felt the need to take a full shower every time she pooped, which, I mean, that's a different thing, but still funny. It's not cost wise, but in college my best friend and her dad had to take Metro North out of NYC to Westchester. We were in Grand Central and he asked her to get the tickets, whatever first class tickets they had. There are no first class tickets for Metro North. They're all the same. I worked at the concession stand at a movie theater and it was opening weekend for a large Marvel movie and the line was super long to get popcorn. This rich millionaire dude from India walked up to me and handed me his Amex Black card and waved a hand over the entire line of customers and said whatever they want my friend and plopped it down hard on the glass counter. I'm just like, are you sure? Him. What either they want with a huge smile on his face. He waited as the entire line ordered crap tons of food, entire combos, large everything, extra candy. I was like your total is up $10,718.62 and I swiped the card and it said transaction complete and he said thank you my friend and he went to watch his movie having fed everybody in line. Absolutely unreal moment. And no I didn't get a tip or anything but now I have a cool story to tell on Reddit. Complete strangers with just an unlimited budget to spend on movie snacks and drinks thanks to this man they didn't even know. Chaotic good. Somebody told me about a guy bragging about spending $100 on a bottle of wine and she told me everyone knows good wine is $100 a glass, not a bottle. I mean to be fair, that's a very scalable item. This is sort of an opposite comment. I work at a big software company with some fairly well-heeled individuals. One night I was out drinking with a group of people and was ready to leave. There's a girl there whose father is on the board. She's super cool but also has unimaginable wealth. She was leaving at the same time so I offered to walk her home since she lived in the city and I had to catch an Uber out of the city. We walked for a bit and she asked me why I was so into waking if I was going to get an Uber anyways. I told her I was walking out of the surged pricing zone. The look on her face. It was like I had introduced her to a concept that she could not fathom. Heeled. Heels wear out on the shoes of peasants who walk everywhere instead of riding. My dad, who is very wealthy and very stingy, once offered to get me out of a tough situation financially. I didn't have a car and was really struggling to make ends meet. I was telling him about what was going on in my life, and he opens up his wallet and hands me all of its contents. It was $7. He kept saying how he'll give me everything he has, and hands me the $7. He felt really proud doing it too. My sister and I, both Latin American, befriended a Chinese girl in college. We always helped her in studying and with her English. Turns out her dad was some billionaire in China who owned a chemical producing company. She drove an expensive Audi and for the longest, up until 2 years ago, I was freeloading off the Chegg account she opened up for me. That account was paid for about 3 years. Whenever she'd invite us to go eat, the bills were super expensive, like $300 plus for just 3 people, but she played it off like they were nothing. I had never once eaten a single meal over $40 per plate until we ate with her. She'd always take us Starbucks, food and on a couple occasions bought us books for school. At one point we went shopping with her. She wanted a laptop. She was gonna buy me one too but I felt too guilty to accept it. Laptop was $3,000. Some Apple laptop. I felt like it was too much. She was really cool and treated my sister like her sister. She was living alone and didn't know many people. We were always friendly with classmates and that's how she got to know us. My sister and I are from low-income families. The money that was spent around her was ridiculous. Like $300 to $400 plus per lunch almost every day. That was around my weekly pay back then. Really miss her though. She was funny to be around with and always wanted to learn more about the US. Always insisted we go out with her to movies, shopping or dining and teach her about our culture. Have not heard from her in 3 years. She went back to China and we never saw her on campus again. For what it's worth, it doesn't sound like she bought friends. And it doesn't sound like you took the unethical kind of advantage of the situation. And she learned a lot about culture and got to experience America and have people help her learn before she returned to China. Just her language skills alone are probably very impressive back home. I grew up surrounded by wealthy kids who had no idea how money worked. When we were pre-teens and the holidays came around, everyone was talking about their presents. So I said I was super excited because I was getting a new video game that I really wanted as a present. It was the expanded version of Zoo Tycoon. One of my classmates said to me, "So when are you getting your golf cart?" I just stared at him and said, "Aren't those super expensive?" He laughed and replied, "It's not that bad. I already wrecked my old one. So this is a replacement and is basically free. I just started at him thinking to myself, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. I have an incredibly rich friend and we were talking about owning a home someday. I was complaining about the prospect of having to pay off a mortgage for 20 plus years and she said, oh, why don't you just not get a mortgage and pay for it in cash? She had no idea that people don't have access to hundreds of thousands of dollars like that. We had a client who worried if $50,000 a month would be enough to live on for the rest of her life. I freaking hope so. Even as a yearly salary that would be good. I was good friends with a girl whose parents were billionaires and she didn't make a big deal out of it, but every once in a while she'd produce a gem like I hadn't worn these jeans in ages. Also found £500 in one of the pockets, lol. Drove my Passat through a flooded road because everybody in front of me was as well. Engine dies. Thought it through a rod. Best friend with a multi-million-dollar trust fund says, well, it was time for you to get a new car anyways. Odd example as the people involved aren't really rich. Of course, they're older. If you can't get job, just work in McDonald's and work your way up. You can easily live off of that. The same people also think you can get a job in my field by just walking in and asking for it. You're just lazy. I could get that job without STEM degree, and I left school at 17. You just need to be confident. Only after years of being an antagonistic butthole did my septuagenarian father finally admit he doesn't know what the job market is like or how people break in or even get interviews. My friend has 2 Teslas which each cost more than our house. He can't understand why I would choose to drive a 1996 Saturn stick shift. The first time my aunt bought a train ticket, they told her it cost 50, so she gave them a 50 bill. But the ticket was actually 50 cents. I think I was the banana person, new to smoking. My friend said they barely had enough money to buy weed. It was my first time so I offered to pay and said for one joint it's like what, $60 and got laughed at. Fun times. I told my parents they were rich. My mom has worked a 6-figure job for 30 plus years, and my dad worked one for 20 plus. They have 2 houses. 2 cars, nice ones, go on yearly vacations to the tropics on top of other stuff, paid for my sisters and my university college out of pocket. I could go on. My dad said he wasn't rich. It really goes to show it's a matter of perspective. If they are spending all their money, it probably doesn't feel like they are rich. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.